Hello everyone, welcome back to week 5, which is today we are going to learn a new things, totally new, a new spectrum of learning, which is we are going to learn our very first programming language. For most of you guys, right? For most of you guys, you never really do any programming in your life, which is we are going to learn something which is called R, all right, which is called R. So I think for me myself, right, R is quite easy, quite straightforward compared to the other programming language, especially Python. All right, so Python is quite easy as well, but comparatively between R and Python, Python is a lot more difficult. But at the same time, Python, you can do a lot more other things using Python. All right, enough with yapping. Now let's start with our learning, which is we wanted to learn very first thing, how can we run R and where can we run R. Alright, so in this case, right, we have two options to run R. Alright, so the very first one is you can run in, sorry, let me just delete this one. The very first one is you can actually run in Google Colab, and the second one you can install and download R Studios, and you can run using RStudio, which is in your desktop or local machines, right? So I'll just provide the very simple implementation first, which is the first one is Google Colab. Alright, so how can you run this programming language of R in your Google Colabs? Alright, so the very first thing is what you can do is you can simply open Google Colab. Alright, but there is actually a caveat where you cannot run Google Colab in your Monash account, because I think Monash did not subscribe Google Colab. So let's say if I go to my Monash account here, right, this is my Monash account. Let's say if I search Google, let me just try to make it bigger for this one. Let me just try to search for Google Colab, right? So what happened is if I go to Google Colab through Monash account, it says you do not have access to Colab. So what you can do is you can, let me just close this one first. What you can do is you can just log into your personal Gmail account and simply search Google Colab. Alright, so when you search Google Colab, right, you can just simply go to Google Colab and you can create a new notebook. Alright, so when you create a new notebook, by right you are here already. Alright, so it takes a while to load. So by right you are here already. I'll just explain a few syntax for Google Colabs. Alright, so the very first thing that you need to focus on is when you click connect, right? Okay, just connect first. When you click connect and when it's connected already, right, you go to this runtime and then you change runtime type. In this runtime type you can just choose R. Alright, when you choose R, you just save and then just wait for it to be run first. Alright, so that while it's running, right, so the very first thing, is it connected to let me just see. Okay, so this one is R already. So when you did that, the second thing is let's try to be familiar with the Jupyter notebook, right? So the very first one is we have, you can change name here. So let's say this one is week 5 notebook. So what you can do is you can actually create your Jupyter notebook for R here. So if you go to here, right, let me just go from Google Colab first. Here you can retrieve your week 5 notebook from here. Alright, so that is how it works. So that is the very first thing. The second thing is how can you actually upload file. Alright, so how can you upload file is you can simply click this folder and you can just press this upload icon and try to find any CSV data. So because most of the time we are going to deal with CSV data, right? So let's just try CSV data here. Okay, now I found web funnel CSV, right? So I simply upload. Alright, so web funnel is here already. Alright, so that is how you can use Google Colab. Let's just try to run our very first code. So the very first code is, let's say I wanted to print haha, this is simplest one, right? Then it works. So it shows that this thing is working. So that is the very first step of how can you run your R codes, right? It's either from Google Colab or from R Studios. So this is the first options. All right, now let's go to the second option. The second option is you need to install R and R Studio. So the difference between Google Colabs and R, Google Colab is basically all of your data is in cloud. Alright, meanwhile, if you are using R, if you are installing R and installing R Studios, right, everything is within your computers. Alright, since I already installed R, I cannot really like show you step by step. But what you can do is, the very first thing when you go to this R, right, you can simply go to Cloud R project. There is a link over here, right? You can just go to here and you can download based on your operating system is. So let's say you are using Mac OS, then you can download R for Mac OS. If you are using Windows, then you can download R for Windows. All right, that is very straightforward. Now the second thing is, after you download, you can simply install the R. Just double click your installation file, right? Now that is the very first thing that you need to install, which is R. The second things that you need to install is basically you need to install R Studio. And how can you install R Studio is you can simply click this one, all right, and you can find the file, the download file or the package file in here. So you just simply download based on your browser. So if you are using MacBook, then use this one. If you are using Windows, then use .exe. If you are using Ubuntu or Linux, you can just use .deb and etc. So that is how it works. All right, so once you install R, right, so I'll just open my R. Once you install R, this is your UI going to be looks like, the user interface for R Studios, right? So I'll just like double click this one. All right, double click this one, then we are exactly similar with this one. Now let's go through one by one what is in each of the components. The very first one is menu bar and toolbar. So menu bar and toolbar, I mean, I don't have this one because this one is like Windows, I think. So menu bar and toolbar is technically all of this thing. All right, so this one is menu bar and this one is toolbar. All right, so that is the things that you need to know or be familiar first. Now the second thing is you need to know about source or the editor, right? So source is something like this. So what is source? Basically, source is where you actually put your code. So let's say I just print haha and then run, it will display over here. So this is what source is. But all right, but sometimes depending on your computer, right, sometimes if you open your R Studios, you doesn't have source. It looks like this. It looks like something like this. So you have only three components. This one is the first one, this one is the second one, and this one is the third one, right? So let's say if you do not have source, when you first open the R Studio, right, what you have to do is just double click the console over here, then only these source components will be open. All right, so is it clear? I really hope it's clear. So that is the first one. The second one is run and source button. So basically in here, right, run and source button, and the purpose of this one is to actually run the code. So as I mentioned previously, let's say is I print ha 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 and I press R, then it's if and I press run over here, that is going to be displayed over here. So that is the purpose of this run and etc. Alright, so that is the third one. The fourth one is console. Console is where the codes going to be here, or you can just simply write code in console as well. So let's say if you wanted to print haha over here, right, let me just try print, give me a second, print haha, haha, then I can print haha over here, right? So this is where you can put your code line by line. All right, so this is what console for. And let's say if you wanted to use terminal as well, you can just simply click this terminal and console. All right, so that is the difference between console as well as source. Now the next thing is environment and history. So what is this environment and history? So let's say if I make a variable later on, because we haven't learned about variable, right? Let's say I make one variable which is student name is equals to Rahman Rom, right? If I run this one, what happened is all of the values are going to be storing here. I mean, it's going to be stored in the back end, right? But you can see clearly what are the variables name and what are the values for the variables. So this one is the purpose for environment and history. All right, and last one is files, plot, and help. So let's say whatever plot you are going to do or whatever files you are going to looking for, it is going to be here. And even packages, right? Whatever packages you are going to install is going to be displaying over here. So this is what RStudio is. All right, so I think that's it. We will go further after this, but honestly, for the meantime, right, I think most of the time I will maybe just like ditch RStudios, and I will try to use Google Colab more. For one reason, I think Google Colab is a lot more simpler for everyone. Everyone can just like simply open the website and then simply run it, right? So I think I'll just like proceed with Google Colab rather than RStudios. But if you want to use RStudios, that's fine. I'm okay already. All right, so I think that's it for the very first video. See you in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.